so I took the body off. Actually, this,
Speaker.
yeah, this is, I think it's. Yeah, detect.
You make Sorrel to Jim.
Yeah. Cool. Detect, so we should be too. Oh, sorry.
Just signal to me when we start.
Okay,
Because you're gonna have to change it too, so we know what comes up.
so start the presentation.
Yeah, but you, am I unmuted?
Yep.
Okay, cool. All right, well, good evening, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our 2023 Black History event. This month, actually this year, we're gonna be talking about the state of Black nurses and the legacy, past, present, and future. I am Sophia Chu, the Executive Director of the Caribbean Community Service Center, where we support, empower, and advocate for Caribbean nationals in the Americas. That's the entire America. So it starts from the Caribbean or South and Central America, all the way up to Nova Scotia, Canada, because that's where our enslaved ancestors were brought over. So our job is to make sure that we provide a welcoming environment for Caribbean nationals here in the United States. It's an honor and pleasure to have you beautiful ladies and gent with us this afternoon as we talk about the history of nursing, how integral Black nurses were from the beginning of time until now, and then you ladies creating the legacy for newer nurses. We can bring up the program so we can kind of give you an outline of what we're going to be discussing today. So we're gonna turn it over to Robert now, and he is going to give you the reason behind this actual program. We're gonna talk a little bit about Nurse Mary Seacole, Nurse Mary Mahoney, and then we will introduce our panelists to you and the discussion that goes along with that. And we have asked actually Ayana to help us with the introduction of the panelists. So without further ado, I'm going to switch places with Robert, so Robert can come up here and tell you the purpose of the event.
All right, thank you, Sophia. So our event today is, we always want to look at our Caribbean history, which is so vital, but so misunderstood sometimes. So this year, we've learned about Mary Seacole, who was a legendary Jamaican nurse from the mid-19th century. And we learned there was a new book published about her this year, which we saw and read. So that got us interested. And we also, of course, are bringing Mary Mahoney, who is our American nurse, so we could have a kind of a contrast. And then after we go over some of their history, then we're going to look at, talk about where we are presently here in Detroit. That's why our panel is here. So that's our purpose.
Okay, so now we're gonna start touching on Mary Seacole. We found a short article that tells you a little bit about her. And so she was very famous for her strength. Robert is gonna go more in depth about her. I don't know how many people have actually heard about Mary Seacole, but they made a contrast between her and Florence Nightingale. And because of the times back then, although she had all the professional ethics of a nurse and using the, in Jamaica, we say obia, it's known as voodoo, it's known as black magic, but it's all spirituality coming from the herbs that our ancestors used for healing purposes. The folks were, although they wanted to use her help in the dark, they really didn't want her to be an upfront nurse, if that makes sense. But you know, as Caribbean women are, Black women are, we find a way to get it done. And what Mary did was she found a way to get it done. And her history was hidden from us for years until we go about learning about ourselves. That's when we discover who Mary Seacole is. So Robert, if you wanna go ahead. Oh, let me show a short video first of a little clip that I found about her that kind of centers us on the conversation before Robert talks more about. I guess the internet in here is not that fast.
We could just go to the presentation. I have a lot to say.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Put it on the screen.
Hey guys, I'm Bonnie, and welcome back to Black History Lessons. Today I'm going to tell you all about the icon that was Mary Seacole. Mary Jane Seacole was a British Jamaican nurse and businesswoman who set up the British Hotel behind the lines during the Crimean War. Born Mary J. Grant in 1805 in Kingston, Jamaica, her father was a Scottish soldier in the British Army, and her mother, who ran a well-known boarding house, was a mixed-race woman respected for her medicinal skills. Mary's mother was, in fact, referred to locally as a doctress. When Mary was born, African enslaved people made up much of the island's population. However, like her mother, Mary was born free. By the age of 12, she was helping her mother run a boarding house in Kingston, where many of the guests were sick or injured soldiers. Mary's mother was skilled in traditional medicines and passed on this knowledge to Mary. As well as this, Mary also learned a lot from the army doctors staying at the boarding house. On hearing the news of British soldiers going off to Russia to fight in the bloody battles, she wanted to help. Off she went to the War Office in London to request to join Florence Nightingale and her team of nurses, treating wounded and sick soldiers in the Crimea. Sadly, Mary was turned down. In 1855, she set off to the Crimea in a ship stocked with medical supplies. She arrived to a terrible state. Many of the soldiers were cold, dirty, and hungry, and those that were sick and wounded weren't being properly cared for. She decided something had to be done, and so Mary opened a British hotel near the battlefields. But this wasn't the kind of hotel you'd expect to stay in on your holidays. It was basically a hut made of metal sheets where soldiers could rest and buy hot food, drinks, and equipment. Mary used the money spent there to help treat and care for sick and wounded soldiers. As well as treating soldiers at her hotel in Crimea, Mary would also visit the battlefront on her horse, taking sound sandwiches, drinks, bandages, and medicines with her. Mary was so caring, she became known amongst the soldiers as Mother Seacole. Although Mary was very popular, she sadly still experienced racism. At one of her goodbye parties in 1852, a man made a speech to thank Mary for helping treat those who had been sick, but exclaimed that it was a shame her skin wasn't white, as it would have made her more acceptable. Mary could not allow this, however, so responded that I should have been just as happy and just as useful and as much respected by those whose respect I value. Despite being so well loved, Mary was largely forgotten about in public memory after her death in 1881. It was only in 1980, ahead of the centenary of her death, that public interest in her story grew once more. A statue of Mary Seacole that was unveiled outside St. Thomas Hospital in London in 2016 is believed to be the first in the UK to honour a Black woman. Be sure to come back for more Black history lessons, where we'll be talking about more great icons.
Okay, so that was a little bit about Mary Seacole. Let me go back and share the screen for the presentation. And Robert, I think you're up next. It's taking a minute to load. Aha, there we go, finally. So Robert, you wanna,
Yep.
let me bring
Presentation
up
for-
your, yeah, let me. 2 minutes. Mhm.
Okay, and then now I'm going to share Robert's presentation. Okay, what is going on here? Okay, let's try this again. Robert, do you have your presentation up that you actually can just talk to?
Yeah.
Yeah, please, because I'm having an issue sharing.
Okay,
information
so,
here.
I'm very happy to talk about Mary Seacole. So I based my presentation on two books. One is, this is Mary Seacole, her own memoir, which she published in 1958. And then this is a book by Helen Rappaport, who kind of looked back at Mary Seacole and tried to find out details. I read the wrong one first. I read this one first, and it's hard to understand it because she looked back at a lot of the paper trail for Mary Seacole. So Mary Seacole's, I would recommend as the place to start. It's really only got 150 pages. It's a nice read too. So that's what I'm basing my presentation on, what I found here and what I found some other places. So first thing when you're looking at autobiographies, you want to look at how trusty is the narrator? Is she really, what's their perspective? Are they telling you all the story or what? So this is in Mary Seacole's words from the book, how she is as the narrator. It says, in the first place, my memory is far from trustworthy, and I keep no written diary. In second place, the reader must have more than enough of journals and chronicles of the Crimean War, and I am only the historian of Spring Hill, which was her hotel. And in the third place, unless I am allowed to tell the story of my life my own way, I cannot tell it at all. So she's telling us she's going to tell us her story her way and what's important to her. So what's very interesting about her, though, she was born in Kingston, Jamaica in 1805 as Mary Jane Grant. Her father was a Scottish soldier and her mother was a Jamaican nurse. And her mother ran a boarding house for invalid British soldiers and naval officers. And that's how Mary learned her skills in herbal medicine and nursing from her mother. So what you can't see, I have a timeline of Mary Seacole. And what's very interesting is how she's telling her story. So she was born in 1805, which was during the slavery era. So she got married in 1936 to Edwin Horatio Hamilton Seacole. So she was about 30 years old then. And she described him as very delicate. And he only lived a few years. And then he passed on. So, so Mary was on her own. What's interesting about her story, then the next thing she really did, and really picks up her story, she went to Panama as her brother was in Panama. So the first 45 years of her life are covered in 8 pages. She skipped over. She did not mention the end of slavery in 1833 or in 1838. She didn't mention George William Gordon and the Warren Bay Rebellion. She just kind of skipped over that. So I think that's important to just notice her self-identification. And what she did was she called herself a Creole. I am a Creole and have good Scotch blood coursing in my veins. And so what I found out from the definition of Creole at the time was it kind of meant I was born in Jamaica. It didn't necessarily denote race. White person could have been Creole if they were born in Jamaica, a black person. According to Orlando Patterson, a Creole could also have been enslaved. So there was really, it's really a loose definition. She was a free person, but she, and through her novel and through her career, she kind of played, she had ambivalence about her African ancestry, didn't mention too much, but and kind of sided with the British people. It's kind of her peers. She hosted people in her hotel, and so. But the good thing is she didn't really have. She didn't forget where she came from. So she said that when she went to London, she traveled to London a few times, as well as Haiti, and she liked to travel at Cuba. And when she went to London, she noticed, she said this, she said, the efforts of the London street boys to poke fun at my and my companion's complexion, I am only a little brown, a few shades duskier than the brunettes whom you all admire so much, but my companion was very dark and fair, if I can apply the term to her, subject for their rude wit. So this is how she thinks of herself. She was a little brown. And one of the things to note is that the place where she resided and where her sister had a house, who was famous, called Blundell Hall. It's the current site of where the Institute of Jamaica is located. And that was where she had her hotel, and she hosted various British officers and soldiers, naval officers who came in. And she not only nursed them, but also provided food and shelter. So she really ran a whole entire operation. There was a cholera epidemic in Jamaica in 1850. That was where she really had a lot of experience dealing with that issue, and really honed her nursing skills on that. So one of the things she did was she moved to Panama. She traveled to Panama. Her brother was there, and so she was going to start her own house in Panama where she could host people and have a hotel and provide nursing services, because, as I'm sure you know, there were a lot of diseases during that time in Panama. So she had a lot of chance to treat people and also to rent a hotel. In Panama, speaking to her view of racism at the time, she really had a problem with the Americans who came. Seems like the British treated her with enough decency and respect that she could deal with them. Here's what she said. She said, against the Negroes, of whom there were many in the Isthmus, and who almost invariably filled the municipal offices and took the lead in every way, the Yankees had a strong prejudice. But it was wonderful to see how freedom and equality elevate men. And the same Negro who perhaps in Tennessee would have cowered like a beaten child or a dog beneath an American's uplifted hand would face him boldly here, and by equal courage and superior physical strength cow his oppressor. So it was good to see that she had a good perspective on dealing with people. But it was hard to imagine at the time, but that was during the American Civil War had not happened yet. That was like 1858. So it was a totally different era. She had been denied. One time when she wanted to go back to Jamaica, she got on the ship and there were some British women on the ship and they raised a fuss, and then she had to get off the ship and she had to take a different ship. Fortunately for her, because she had known so many soldiers and sailors from her work in Jamaica, she knew soldiers and sailors who were riding the ships, running the ships. So she went to somebody she knew and she got her ride back to Jamaica that way. So then her big event was the Crimean War, which started. And you know, it's really startling to look at that. Crimean War is in Ukraine, right? We're still fighting in the same place. It's the Russians who were asserting their authority over the area fought by the British, the French, and the then Ottoman Empire. The British and French wanted to keep a balance of power. They didn't want the Russians to get too much power. So they joined the Ottoman Empire in trying to stall out the Russians from taking over. Sound familiar? Same place, same day. She was in London at the time, and there were reports of how poorly the British were prepared for the war. And I guess she saw an opportunity. So she went to the individuals she knew in the armed services and asked them, could I go to Crimea and work with you as a nurse? Could I support you? They told her no. So Mary Seacole, being a strong Jamaican woman, said, I'm going anyway. And so she found some people, some soldiers who knew her well enough, and she got a partner who was a white man. Day was his last name. And they got some support within the army to go and start a service to treat soldiers who were injured, and also to create a kind of a hotel where they're served hospitality. This is where soldiers would go to have their own meal, to relax, to drink, to have fun, and also it served as a hospital for those who were injured. So she went there, and she, when she got there, she brought a lot of her own provisions. So that was one of the key things you have to think about to start this. She had to bring her own provisions. She did go to meet Florence Nightingale. That's when nursing as a profession started. She went to Florence Nightingale and wanted to work for her. And Florence Nightingale basically said, no, we don't want you. Although I'm sure there was much need for more nurses, she knew why she was being denied. So she kept on going and started her own profession. She did not get paid to help the soldiers. So she would actually go on the battlefield, or people would come in after they were injured, and she would treat them with her herbal medicine. She did not get paid. The way that she kept her finances going was through the sale of food and provisions and supplies. So that entrepreneurship was how she was able to sustain herself financially during that time. And all of the work that she did as nursing for soldiers was free, which is really astounding to think about it. One of the things she wrote in the book, kind of like her attitude, says, and the grateful words and smile which rewarded me for binding up a wound or giving a cooling drink was a pleasure worth risking life for at any time. So she was doing it for free. But she did charge a lot of money whenever there were provisions that was noted that she needed to, but she also was able to sustain herself that way. To her, in her own mind, what part of the service that she was giving besides just being a nurse was just being there as a woman. She mentioned several times in here, a soldier was, oh my, you know, soldier was dying and I can't talk to my wife, I can't talk to my mother or whoever. And it would be her, she kind of fulfilled the role of a woman, that the soldier had a woman to talk to. And she said, I am not ashamed to confess that I love to be of service to those who need a woman's help. And wherever the need arises, on whatever distant shore, I ask no greater or higher privilege than to minister to it. So that was really, in her mind, part of what she was doing. Now, in her autobiography, she does not mention a daughter at all. Zero. In Helen Rappaport's research, she doesn't know. She thinks that she had a daughter. And actually, there were, remember back to when she said she was a narrator telling her story her way? So there were actually about 4 accounts, contemporary accounts, including from Florence Nightingale herself, where they said, oh yeah, she had her daughter with her, 14-year-old daughter with her in Crimea. I wish we could have had the screen, because there's actually, they found a photograph who the author thinks is, could be her daughter. They have actual, they found it in Crimea, war footage. So her 14-year-old daughter, if she was there, she disappeared later on. There is no, the author could not find any paper trace of her. Her name was Sally, is what she thought. She could not find any paper trail of her afterwards. But they have the photograph. There's a drawing also that they think identifies her, but that's still a great mystery. Nobody really, the author was not able to answer that. So the war only lasted about 2 years. So she finally got her British hotel built. She got all of the provisions. She had to borrow money from British suppliers to get provisions there. And then the war ended. And so guess what? She was bankrupt. Because she had to give away bottles of whiskey, all the things that she had there, because she couldn't bring them back. So then her mission kind of came. So she went back to England. She did go back to Jamaica a few times, but she went back to England basically, and then she had a problem because she owed all this. The soldiers who served there and received her services were very grateful for her. They organized several events where she would raise money. So there were some Seacoal Fund balls where people came and made donations for her so that she could sustain herself and pay off her debts. So that was how she survived. She did receive some notoriety. One of her customers was Alexandra, Princess of Wales, who had a bad knee. And so it sounded like Mary Seacole would go and would give her massages, help her take care of her knee. It also said that she brought this mango drink for her, which was something that she came. So there was also, it seems like, proof events where she would go to Buckingham Palace and tell the guard, I'm here to see so-and-so, and they would let her in unannounced. So that was the kind of relationship she said she had. She was kind of somebody who was working at the court. I wish you could see there's a bust done by her nephew, by the nephew of Queen Victoria. That's one of the documents that we have. So after she died, 1881, she passed away. Her legend kind of kept bubbling under the surface. So the author did a great job of finding all these little mentions of her, like 1881, her obituary. 1891, she was mentioned in a novel about Crimea. They had her name in there. In 1892, Count Glycian, who served in the war, in his obituary, they wrote a little bit about Mary Seacole and how he appreciated how she helped him when he was injured in Crimea. 1903, there was a book, Noble Deeds of the World's Heroines. So Mary Seacole had a little place in there. Then there was a story in the Daily Gleaner, Story of Life of Mary Seacole, 1905. 1910, when Florence Nightingale died, in the Gleaner, there was a story of Jamaican veteraness. They had a story about Mary Seacole. So she kept bubbling up under the surface from time to time. In 1954, it was the 100th anniversary of the Crimean War. The Jamaican Nurses Association in Jamaica named their headquarters the Mary Seacole House in 1954, 100 years after, to honor her. And so she kind of started to have more of a more say. In 1973, in London, she died in London, her body's in London. Her gravesite was revitalized, and there was a new tombstone put there. It was done by the Jamaican Women's Club of London and the British Commonwealth Nurses War Memorial Fund. The way it happened was somebody gave the secretary of the British Commonwealth War Fund a copy of this book, this old book that they got at a used, for a couple pence at a used bookstore, and said, "Wow, did you know this about this woman?" And she read it, and she, I guess, met with the Jamaican Women Club, and they revitalized her gravesite. There's stamps now in Jamaica. And then she was included in the curriculum of schools in Jamaica. I have some stuff that shows the actual curriculum for kindergarten, primary school, that far back, that mentioned Mary Seacole. In 2003, the British Broadcasting Company, BBC, took a poll of who is the greatest Black Brit of all time. And Mary Seacole was #1. She was voted the greatest Black Brit of all time. So now her legend lives on. I have a picture of Mary Seacole Hall, which is the female residence at University of West Indies, Mona. There's apartment buildings, Mary Seacole apartment building. And then this author found a portrait that was done of her, a portrait, and that portrait a few years ago was added to British Portrait Museum. I don't know if anybody's ever been in London and been to there. It really is very prominent building, and all of the big heads from England's history are there. There's a portrait of everybody in there. And so now she is included as one of the legendary figures that are available to see at this British Portrait Museum. Then the other biggest event was that statue you see that Sophia had a picture on earlier. That's at St. Thomas Hospital. It seems like there was a lot of fundraising done to raise that. And that's kind of like the latest cap. There's a Mary Seacole Trust in London. I tried to contact them, but I couldn't. So, she still retains a prominent role. And you go right to the last slide. So as I was putting together this presentation, I looked on Facebook at Bill Vanderwell, a social worker professor from University of Michigan, had this slide. Detroit nurse opens up a grocery store in Detroit, Dexter, Linwood neighborhood. So there's Mary Seacole. So that's really how I would like to end. Just that spirit, that entrepreneurial spirit, there's no job for me, I'm gonna go do what I need to do. And that's kind of the spirit of Mary Seacole.
Okay, thank you, Robert. Yeah, we're gonna come back around to talk about a little bit, like do the comparisons from you ladies' perspective of Mary Seacole and Mary Mahoney, right? So now I am going to share our presentation again. Let's do this. And we're gonna start the conversation about Mary Mahoney. So, you ready, Ayana?
Yes, I'm actually happy to look at that.
Yeah, you can, I'm trying to close this thing out. I have so many things open. Yeah, I don't want to close the entire thing. There we go. Okay. Oops. This thing. All right, are you able to load this screen? There we go.
Hi, everyone. Mary Eliza Mahoney was our first African-American nurse here in the United States. She was born in May of 1885. 1845.
1845. Yeah.
1845. In Boston, Massachusetts. Born to freed slaves who had moved to Boston from North Carolina. Mary Mahoney learned from an early age the importance of racial equality. She was educated at Phillips School in Boston, which after 1855 became one of the first integrated schools in the country. The New England Hospital for Women and Children operated one of the first nursing schools in the United States. In 1878, at the age of 33, Mary Mahoney was admitted to the hospital's professional graduate school for nursing. Of the 42 students that entered the program in 1878, only 4 completed it in 1879. Mary Mahoney was one of the women who finished the program, making her the first African-American in the United States to earn a professional nursing license. She finally retired from nursing after 40 years in the profession. However, she continued to champion women's rights. After the 19th Amendment was ratified in August of 1920, Mary Mahoney was among the first women who registered to vote in Boston.
Did you wanted to add anything else about Mary Mahoney, any of you ladies, versus just what we picked up?
She had a sister who also tried to attend the New England Hospital School of Nursing, but she was not admitted.
Mhm.
So as Ayana pointed out of 40 people, only 3 graduated. In their constitution or their board or whatever, this was a hospital founded by nurses, by women,
Mhm.
white women in Boston. And so they made a point of saying 1 Black, 1 Jew had to be in the program. So Mary Mahoney had been working in the hospital as a janitor, as a cook, as some sort of domestic work she was doing in the hospital. And so she tried to get in and she didn't get in. She didn't get in the first time, she got in the second time to get into the program. And as Ayana put it, she was 33 years old. So think about that.
She was trying for a long time.
Yes, she was. And so she made a point of getting after her school after she graduated to make sure they would admit more Blacks. And they were really slow and sluggish in doing this. As far as American nursing history, Linda Richards went to the same school and had graduated, I think, about 5 or 6 years before Mary came into the program. So Linda Richards is supposedly the first American white nurse, and then Mary Mahoney is the first Black nurse trained. So we're really proud of her. If you look at the time frame, Mary Seacole before her, 1805 is when Mary Seacole was born. So we're gonna probably get to a discussion about that. I wonder how much she knew about Mary Seacole, if they did know.
Right.
Because so much of our history was kind of put beneath the covers, and we didn't know much about our own history.
Right.
And that's traditional with the United States. I'm not sure how it is in Jamaica, but I'm sure we'll talk about some of that in the discussion as well.
Yeah, it's a colonizer conversation, so it's more than just America. It was the entire enslaved folks that we were not taught our history by design, right? So I was able to find a small short video that I am going to attempt to bring up now. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to start this video. Okay. And see if I could bring this presentation, bring this video up. Let's find the video. Academy.
Hello, friends and followers. This is Nurses Talking, and I am Dale Barcy. As always, if you like what you see, give us a like, subscribe. Today, we feature Mary Eliza Mahoney. She was a registered nurse who changed the course of American nursing forever when she became the first professionally trained African-American nurse in 1879. She was born in the Free State of Massachusetts in 1845 after her parents moved from the slave state of North Carolina. The oldest of 3 children, Mary became interested in nursing as a career when she was a teenager. She began working as an untrained practical nurse, but soon found that she needed to make more money. It was then that she began working in the New England Hospital for Women and Children in Roxbury, Massachusetts, as a maid, a laundress, cook, and occasionally as a nursing assistant. The hospital, which had only female doctors and assisted women in the study of medicine, was also the first hospital in the United States to offer a nursing program. It is now the Dimmock Community Health Center. After working at New England Hospital for 15 years, Mahoney was accepted into their nursing program in 1878 at the age of 33. The 16-month program was very rigorous and consisted of 16-hour days. When the students were not working on the wards at the hospital or doing private duty in patients' homes, they were expected to attend day-long classes and lectures. Only 4 of the original 42 students who started the program had the stamina and willpower to complete the course. When she received her diploma in 1879, she became the first Black American professional nurse. Mahoney devoted herself to private duty nursing for most of her 30-year career because of the still prevalent racial prejudice in public nursing. Many of her patients were from prestigious families and were impressed with her skill and professionalism. At the end of her career, she was director of a Black orphanage in New York. She dedicated herself to her work and never married. In 1896, Mahoney joined the newly formed and primarily white Nurses Associated Alumni of the United States and Canada, later known as the American Nurses Association, the ANA. Because of their slowness in accepting Black members, She helped form the National Association of Colored Graduate Nurses, the NACGN, and spoke at their first convention in 1909. At that time, she addressed the inequalities for African Americans in nursing education and asked for a demonstration at the New England Hospital. The convention wholly supported her, elected her chaplain, and gave her a lifetime membership. For many years, she worked to recruit minority nurses to join the organization. Largely because of her efforts, the number of African American nurses doubled from 1910 to 1930. Even after her retirement from nursing, Mahoney was very active in fighting for women's equality. It should be no surprise that she was one of the first women to register to vote in 1920. After a 3-year battle with cancer, Mary Mahoney died on January 4, 1926, at the age of 81, and was buried in Everett, Massachusetts. Mary Mahoney left a legacy that is just as vital today as it was when she was alive. She fought not only for women of color, but also for educational and professional rights for all minorities. The numerous awards and honors in her name testify to this fact. In 1936, the National Association of Colored Graduate Nurses created the prestigious Mary Mahoney Award to honor those who advance the welfare of minority groups in nursing. When the NACGN merged with the American Nurses Association in 1951, the ANA continued that award. There is also a Mary Mahoney Medal given annually for excellence in nursing. In 1976, she was chosen to be in the Nursing Hall of Fame, and in 1993, in the National Women's Hall of Fame. And that is a brief snapshot of Mary Eliza Mahoney, taken from nursing.theory.org. Join me next week, friends and followers, for a very innovative and very exciting video. Blessings.
Okay. So, let's go back to this Zoom thing, and I will go back to this presentation. So, were there anything that you guys heard that
Hey
you
guys, one of the big
didn't
stories
know?
today.
Oh,
of
wrote
course,
it.
was
Hold
the
on.
weather. This rain is gonna turn
Sorry.
into some bigger storms tonight, and get this, if you go up north for the weekend, some parts are getting 10 to 15
Where is
inches
that
of
thing?
snow.
Sorry.
Two drivers who were racing in Pontiac on this public road hit a driver who was doing donuts in the middle of this intersection. The whole thing was recorded and went viral on social media. The driver who was doing donuts
There it
was
is.
ejected from that stolen.
Okay, sorry, too much news. Okay, let's close this down. So YouTube gave you too much information. Okay, so now I'm bringing back up the Zoom. Okay. Going to share the presentation again. This is where we are now. Okay. So yeah, as I was saying, is there anything that stuck out in you guys' mind that you didn't know before, or it was just familiar information?
We're experts. Because we're Mary Mahoney Association, so we're one of the ones that happened since in 1951, as she pointed out.
Mhm.
The American Nurses Association asked the Black organization, the Colored Graduate Nurses, which Mary Mahoney was part of she was part founder back in 1908 in New York at one of the AME churches. And so they asked us to disband our group and just be one group. And
Mhm.
so it's kind of a little arbitration there, a little arm twisting. And so that happened, but many of the local chapters or clubs, as they were called back then, decided to still continue with Mary Mahoney. And we're only one of 2 organizations left in the United States. There's one in Seattle, Washington, and the one here in Detroit that we call ourselves Mary Mahoney Professional Nurses, and the one in Seattle is also Mary Mahoney. So there's only 2 Mary Mahoney organizations left.
Wow.
And we're the oldest.
We're the oldest.
Oh, I know, you told me. She schooled me on it. So what I'd like to do now is to have Ayana introduce our panelists, and then we can actually start the conversation. So you want to take it away, Madame?
Thank you again. Our first panelist is Olivia D'Souza. Olivia D'Souza is a retired nurse educator. A native Detroiter. She has a diploma from Providence Hospital School of Nursing, BSN, MSN from Wayne State University, and doctorate studies at the University of Michigan. Mr. Souza is a former longstanding president of Mary Mahoney Professional Nurses Detroit. I'm not gonna read.
Yeah.
Our next panelist is Dr. Bridget Leonard. Dr. Bridget Leonard is an award-winning nursing leader with over 25 years of experience. Her transparency, courage, and motivation empowers everyone from certified nursing assistant to chief nursing officer. Dr. Leonard is currently Michigan's American Nurse Association president, and also the first African-American president for the state of Michigan. So very, got some nice.
Very accomplished, right?
Yes. Next panelist is Dr. Wanda Chukwu, is the active Mary Mahoney Professional Nursing member, also chair of our marketing department. Dr. Chukwu is serving as consecutive 2-year term on the ANA, Michigan Nursing and Health Policy Committee. She's also a board member of the Associate Degree Nursing Diversity, Equality, and Inclusion Committee, and also the National Association of Arabic Nurses Association. Also, Dr. Chukwu is a program coordinator and first African American coordinator at Henry Ford College as well. Our next panelist is Danielle Shirley. Danielle graduated from Wayne State University with her BSN in nursing, has a clinical background in emergency medicine, OB, and women's health. She has participated in many health fairs and also very active with her son in high school. And we're so happy to have everyone here. Thank you again for being panelists.
Okay, so I'm gonna stop sharing the screen so we can have some robust conversation. And I think you ladies were given the questions, so we kind of know how the discussion is going. So first, we will start with the youngest of the group. How much did you know about Mary Seacole? I know you know about Mary Mahoney. So how much did you know about Mary Seacole prior to us having this conversation today?
I did not know about Mary Seacole prior to yes, that research. Actually, probably she's Jamaican. Jamaican. So, oh, okay. So yeah, so they don't talk about those things in school. They didn't talk about Mary Mahoney either. It was by Black nursing instructors that actually spoke about Mary. They were moved to Florence.
Oh, Florence Nightingale.
That's it.
Which lady wants to go next? I'm not gonna.
I can piggyback off of that. Prior to receiving the flyer, when I saw her name on the flyer, Mary Seacole, let me see who she is, because I hadn't heard anything about her either. So it's very eye-opening. It also made me aware that, I've been a nurse for almost 27 years. And when I thought back on, I'm like, really, how many, famous Black nurses do I know? And it was very interesting.
Absolutely. We'll just go down the line.
I did learn about Mary Seacole early in nursing school because my clinical instructor was from Jamaica, and she made sure that she was so adamant about what we're gonna know. She talked about Mary Mahoney as well, so there was some early exposure to her, not in the curriculum though, which is different than someone talking about it. It was not in our lesson or our course objectives, but the individual discussion by the individual instructor.
I knew about Mary Seacole when I first started inquiring about Mary Mahoney. I was at a clinical site and one of the nurses there asked me to join the organization to find out more about it. So in that process, I did find about Mary Seacole. I also had history with Jamaica. My dad was born in South Amar, Westmoreland. And so I got this book at the time, The Path We Tread by Elizabeth Carnegie. There's a 2-volume, and she does have about 3 pages about Mary Seacole in there. I remember hearing about the yellow Jamaican that fought the Colorado, what they used to call her.
Oh, yeah.
Those names. And just recently, a few years ago, I was involved with some international nurses too, from Jamaica, and I asked them a question about Mary Seacole, and sure enough, Mona with a big portrait of her is, and statue of her is. And she was known, they said, for her, the green, I forgot what it was, which fruit is it? The green, not the guava, but something, that's what she used for some of those healing properties. So they all know of her.
Breadfruit, maybe?
No, it wasn't breadfruit, I think breadfruit. That's-
Soursop?
It was a herb.
No, it's a fruit.
It's a fruit, jackfruit.
No, it wasn't,
With
I think it
oils.
was probably was a mango or something like a mango. But I don't think it was mango. It's green something. I have to call her about that.
Yeah. Oh, that'd be interesting. I'd like to know.
I'll find out. for you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I know like we use breadfruit leaf to make tea if you're sick or if you have a headache, they use, I think they put some kind of oil on the breadfruit leaf and put it on your forehead and tie it with a tie head, and that's supposed to help alleviate the headache. So.
So I did find out about her. And then recently, 2 years ago, I think it was Chamberlain University, put a little brochure out and they had Mary Seacole on there too. So again, trying to bring more information about the Black nurses. So the top 3 they had was Mary Seacole, Mary Mahoney, and they also had Harriet Tubman. So there's a whole another history of a lot of Americans that were involved in the Civil War and also in the Spanish War too, that we don't always know about too.
That's very true. So piggybacking, oh goodness.
Is there a question in the chat?
Yeah, I think I was letting people on. Yeah, there's no question in the chat. I think there was just, I was letting people in.
See. Two questions.
Okay. Let's see.
Or just maybe click on chat. It's
Yeah, that's what I was looking to do, but I didn't. They said I can't hear the panelists. You're having, I don't know if it's because the audio is actually here on the camera itself.
okay, speak louder.
Speak louder, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So based on what you now know of Mary Seacole and Mary Mahoney, if they were here today, what role do you think they would play in the healthcare system? Anybody wants to take that one first?
They certainly would be activists because they were both activists back then. London was quite, at the time that Mary Mahoney was living, and also Mary Seacole, maybe towards the end of her death, the suffragettes were a common area. They were really kind of radical, if you want to call it today, over in England. But they try to use some of those same processes here in the United States in terms of getting the amendment ratified as we heard about in 1920. I think from what you described for Mary Seacole, she was a big one, wasn't she? Was she kind of big in stature?
used to be that.
She was short. I saw one, and compared to other people, she was not tall.
Okay, so then we have a similarity because Mary Mahoney was like 5 foot and 100 pounds, but she was a dynamo. So here we see this comparison of the women, even not to get big in stature, but big in voice and how you carry yourself and how committed you are in terms of seeking these goals that we need for at this time for the Black nurses here in the United States and also getting to nursing schools. Okay. Okay, still can't hear? Oh, my.
Okay, anybody else wants to answer that
But
question?
when I heard about their stories, it made me think about the things that we're, stressing to our nursing students and also to nurses that are in the workplace regarding advocacy and autonomy. And I think that they would, help nurses to understand that you need a voice in order to make changes. You can't just sit back and expect for things to happen. And I think that they would, like you said, powerhouses that would stress to the nurses like, you have to have a voice, you have to be an advocate, and you have to have that autonomy to make, sometimes to go out on a limb and make those decisions that are not common.
Anybody else wants to chime in on that?
I believe it would encourage more Black nurses to join the field because there, of course, are a lot of health disparities and just in healthcare alone. And historically, Black people do not trust the healthcare system, so we need more representation in healthcare.
I would imagine Mary Sequel having a school or something talking about natural healing and eating foods and how your body could heal naturally as well. So I would imagine that she would have brought the herbs, the foods, and in her book she also talked about the spices, the curry. No wonder those soldiers went there because the smell must have been so, just to walk in, that smell must have been so beautiful. And she had no other choice. I love in the reading I read about Mary Sequel that she said that she destroyed the bottles of wine and didn't want them to take it from her. So she broke the bottles and made sure. So she had fire in her as well too. For Mary Eliza Mahoney, she would have been also an advocate, talking about more representation and the importance of education. Both of these ladies had hard times and they didn't stop. So their no meant I'm still going as well.
Ayana, you want to add to the conversation? Or?
I agree with everyone, especially with bringing in the natural, and I love natural supplements, natural herbs, just bringing that in. I can see having a school, maybe we should form a school, but just having that component, especially in the times that we are now, just going with COVID. COVID has brought out a lot of, I see a lot of people are going more natural versus medicine. And also the times we're in, the trust, bringing in that trust of medical distrust, the disparities, that would make a difference as well.
I think they would take a more, especially Mary Sequel, would take a more holistic approach to medicine and focus more on health promotion, prevention, and instead of just managing the disease, but prevent it to begin with food and diet. There's a lot of things that historically we've been eating as a culture for us, but that's what we grew up for, survival.
Right.
So chitlins and all that stuff, that's what was given to us, so we made it a delicacy. But, it's not really good for us. So I think they would take a more holistic and do health promotion and prevention, because that's prevention's better than cure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It says pomegranate. What's her?
I think they both would be surprised that just like the Crimean War and what's happening now, this is just repeating itself and we still have these shortages. I think there's only like 6% of the nurses are Black, or if you put all the 3 categories that are Indian, Native American. There's still small numbers. It's only like 10% would count the people in. in nursing.
Mhm.
So there's still a lot of discrepancies and we still have to keep on this fight because here we are 150 years later and we're seeing some of these same things. And I know it's very difficult with change. I'm watching something on implicit bias, and they're saying that even some researchers have found maps even in different parts of the United States, and they're able to identify certain political stances, even though the people are dead or not there, because certain things just keep coming into the culture or into the area
Mhm.
without, just like it's magic, what have you, this bias that still exists.
Right.
So it takes a while to change, and we're up for the change, and that's one reason why we're here, and also with this panel to bring this to people's attention too as well.
So based on that previous questions, who are your current nursing role models and how do they influence the work that you do now? Outside of these two great nurses, right? Who are some of your other role models? And how do they influence?
I want to say one of my role models, well, I have role models here, three, Olivia D'Souza, Dr. Chuku, and Dr. Leonard. I didn't know about Mary Mahoney until Dr. D'Souza introduced me to the organization. And when I say being a mentor, you always say you always have not one, but have numerous mentors. Mary Mahoney, Professional Nurses Detroit, has changed me, has evolved me, as we say, helped me connect with sisterhood. So yeah, I have to say these are my mentors.
I was influenced very early on at Wayne State. I had my first clinical instructor. She's actually Italian white woman, and her name is Dr. Ann Millar. But it was only a handful of us as Black students in the class. I mean, it was just a handful of us. And we sat, it was five of us that stuck together. One of the moms called us the Fab Five. And we sat in the front of the classroom at all lectures. And one lecture, she said, "I'm so happy to see you guys sitting here." And she just spoke about eugenics. She spoke about the white coat syndrome. She said we need, more representation for Black nurses. She even talked about the Tuskegee, study. And she said how, historically, they don't go to the doctor because they don't trust. So that was one and she was a nurse practitioner. She worked at a homeless clinic at Cass Corridors, and then I had another instructor, Dr. Barbara Moore, and she was awesome as well. She was a Black instructor. Those were my two go-tos and made me really love nursing and have pride in it, take pride in it.
So for me, there were three people that really impacted my life. My first was Miss Carolyn Wright. She was a longstanding director of Detroit Medical Center. And she was another woman that was short in nature, but when she opened her mouth, everyone listened. And she carried herself with this authority, and she was so knowledgeable. And it was like, I want to be like her. And then another was Sean Levitt, the former CNO of Detroit Medical Center. She recently passed away. But to see her again in that role, to be a powerhouse and to be directing Detroit Medical Center and to be doing it with such style and grace and authority, and always had a smile on her face and was very knowledgeable and was very approachable. I always said, well, I want to be that person. I don't want to be the person that when they see a director or a president or someone coming at them, that they run the other way. I want to be that person that, people say, well, let me have a conversation with her and talk to her. And then lastly was Dr. Ernest Grant, the first male president for ANA. He and I have kind of developed a relationship. In fact, I have to reach out to him because I told him he was going to mentor me. I really didn't ask him. I kind of said, you're going to mentor me. So I got to go back around and make sure he remembers that conversation. But to just see him in that role, especially to be a Black male in such a white female dominated field, and to be respected and to have his voice heard, and for him to go out on a limb and to have ANA push out the racial reckoning statement where basically ANA apologized to Black nurses for not allowing them in. I really think that was very courageous of him to do that. And so I appreciate him, and all of them I just mentioned, because they helped to shape me to who I am today.
My mentor was my late aunt, Ozella Williams, OPN. And during that time, we wore the all white, the white hat, the uniform, shoes, the hard white shoes. Those shoes must have been hard to work in, and the white tights as well. So
They still wear those in the Caribbean. They still wear them. Yeah. Mhm.
But I remember her at age 5 and seeing her with that uniform, and it sparked something in me. And I knew at age 5 that I was going to be a nurse. The next mentor for me was Sharon Gray. She's a dean at Monroe Community College, and she just took me in and told me everything I needed to do in order to teach in a classroom. Because oftentimes you have African American instructors that teach in a clinical setting, but not in a classroom setting, which is a big difference as well. So having her in my life, and then another mentor, just really sitting around Ms. D'Souza. She's our living legend, really. If you go into the hospital and you ask nurses that have been in the field, she's helped so many nurses in our community pass their boards. She's helped so many as well. So being there, seeing her, and being in the space. When I walk, I missed a couple meetings, but she'll look at me. I don't want to get the look. But when you go into a meeting and you see all of us there, it seems like there's a lot of Black nurses, but it's not many. But that room is so powerful to me because suddenly there's no code switching. There's real talk. It's comfortable. It's asking you how you're doing, but it's waiting for you to answer. So I feel like the organizations I joined and being with the Mary Mahoney Professional Nurses of Detroit is also part of mentorship, because if you want leadership, if you want to be able to have opportunities to participate in community events, our president, Carmen Brandon, she'll give you those opportunities as well. And some of those opportunities are not afforded to us in the other sector as well. So it gives us that additional leadership. Yana, would you? It does. It gives you that additional leadership.
So the living legend, now let's hear.
You know, I feel kind of ambivalent about this because I didn't want to be a nurse at first. I didn't know what I wanted to be. I was always amazed that people would say, I want to be a nurse, like you said, age 5. I didn't come from that perspective. I did mention my dad was born in Jamaica. He was always, you know, to have something for yourself. You have $1, save a quarter. He was always business minded. He had a battery shop and he had a grocery store in the 1930s in Detroit. So that's really a lot. So I see my idols, my dad somewhat, I was his oldest child, so I was always around him. So when I did decide to go to nursing school, and in my life, I was always like in the minorities, always few Blacks in grade school, Catholic grade school, same thing in high school. And when I decided to go to nursing school, I ran into a number of challenges because at that time, I think we were in transition. You could not have your application, your picture on the application, because that's how they could discriminate. So the times that I was applying, they didn't have the picture. So here I come in with my last name, which is not a common Black name, as you would think of that, D'Souza, or as my dad used to say, D'Souza. And they weren't expecting me. And so that was often an early awakening about what was going on in the world. My parents were not biased. My dad spoke Spanish, you know, because he's from Jamaica, what have you too. And so I didn't come with a lot of this until I got older and I began to see in the 1950s what was happening down south with the riots and the opposing of the people. So I didn't have any role models that I can think of when I went to nursing school. Everybody was white. I did have a Black instructor who was very meticulous about her shoes. And she's still living. She's in Chicago. I did go to visit her on her 100th birthday, what have you. So she's still living. And but I didn't always have those role models. When I went to Wayne State, Mary Mahoney would have teas. And that's how I got to know who Mary Mahoney was, because I did not know who Mary Mahoney was. Certainly they were not teaching in the curriculum. And so that's how I first knew about Mary Mahoney as being the first Black nurse. Other than that, no other support in terms of that. So some people that contemporary people, certainly Dr. Grant, when I saw him being the first Black male president of AME, I was quite pleased. The other one was Bernice Johnson and Beverly Malone. I got to meet her personally because she came, we invited her to come to Henry Ford College at one time, so we did get to meet her. So there's been like 3 Black presidents, am I correct, Bridget, for AMA? So that's really something important, and how they keep the memory with Mary Mahoney going. So mentors, you know, this is mentorship right here. I'm so proud of everybody here, so that makes me feel good too as well. So thank you.
You wanted to add anything, Ayana?
No, I think I started.
You started with you. Oh, that's right. You're sitting next to the living legend. I forgot. So I know there's only 2 Caribbean people in the panel. Caribbean heritage people first, right? So I don't know how much you guys know about nurses or nursing in the Caribbean versus the US, but that's what our next question is. Do you see or aware of any differences in not necessarily the training, right, but how nurses are treated and what nursing is in the Caribbean versus the US?
I've been to the Caribbean about 5 or 6 times because I've been trying to do some genealogy workshop, but I was not able to get to the hospitals per se. But here 3 years ago, I was involved with some international nurses with an organization here locally, trying to bring the nurses over here to the United States for employment. So I did have an opportunity to meet with a number of them, and I was kind of embittered again because what I thought they should know, some of them didn't know. And I'm like, wait a minute, doesn't the international nurses have this generalized curriculum, what have you? So just recently, I asked one of the people about this. She said, yes, there are differences, although nursing is standard around the world, nursing is slightly different in the Caribbean. She said, there is a difference in culture. We do not interact with much cultural diversity in patients. So they don't have it. They have a pretty much similar population that they're dealing with. And I know there's strata and other sociological issues that may be involved there too as well. She mentioned about the lack of resources to work with, which I was kind of aware of. Because she said, therefore, we have to make shift most of our resources out to work in order to provide care for the patients. We are mostly burned out. So she's dealing with the issues now in Jamaica as well as around a lot of places, the shortage of nurses. She said, we pick up extra shifts because our basic pay cannot provide our needs. Cost of living is more than our pay. And this is where I asked her about what's happening in the United States with the inflation, also in Europe. It's hitting them too. All this with Ukraine is affecting everybody. She said the nurse to patient ratio is like 2 nurses to 10 patients, or at least it used to be 1 to 7. I can't speak to that. You probably can speak to it more so in current working, but I thought the ratio was like about 1 to 6, is it? Or depends on where you're at. I know. That's a really
in
question.
California, it's 1 to 4. In the ICU, it's 1 or 1. Okay. But no, it's not. There is currently no. At least in the state of Michigan, there's really not a nurse to patient ratio.
I think the ones that have the unions do.
But yeah, like
University of Michigan, I think.
Yeah, but yeah, many hospitals don't.
No. And then if you go to long-term care, it's a whole other difference.
Oh,
Nightmare.
1 to 20.
No, 40. I've heard 40. I've heard 40. I've heard 40. 40. She said also, not all hospitals have computer systems to use, especially the rural hospitals in Jamaica. She mentioned that. And we don't have much conference meeting or staff meetings on the unit. She said because the senior nurses are leaving in such a short space of time, the new grad nurses are first to learn on their own. I think we have some that here, I hope it's not meaning they're young, but the people not taking them under their wings to do the mentorship. And she said to take charge of the unit, they say in our country to learn to swim or sink, we had that same one. And then the other thing she mentioned too, I guess because of the system, there's public hospitals and there's the other hospitals. And she said the public hospitals, in order to get promoted, they're very slow in granting the promotions and what you to do as far as I think it's continuing education to get to that promotion. So those were contemporary, because I just got this hot off the press.
Well, I'm glad you asked the question. I'm glad you reached out to her.
So I don't know if anybody's been there recently. Anybody?
To Jamaica.
To see the hospitals or to Jamaica?
I have not, but I actually was going to move into Jamaica. And so I did go to the local hospitals, like I went to St. Andrews, it's a 7-day Adventist hospital. And I looked at the pay.
Okay.
So definitely the pay is very low. And just like here, it's a nursing shortage. And a lot of nurses from Jamaica, because there's a nursing shortage, they're taking nurses from Jamaica and bringing them over here, but that stresses their healthcare system even more. And so it's like and also with nurses in the Caribbean and nurses here, it's just, yeah, like you were saying, you pretty much summed everything up that I was gonna say about like supplies. I was taking care of a patient. She was actually a nurse in Jamaica and she had an asthma attack. So I was giving her breathing treatments and everything. And she was like, and I was like starting her IV and she's like, these are prepackaged. You have, like she was saying that they had like an alcohol bottle that they used to kind of swab. And she's like, oh my gosh, everything is so prepackaged and everything. We have to reuse this and we have to and I'm like, what? We have to reuse? Like, yeah, so it's, you know, stuff like that. And then even in healthcare in Jamaica, if you don't have money, you're stuck at the public hospitals. You can't go. They don't have EMTALA in Jamaica. You know, you don't have money. You have to go to the public hospital, you see, which is overcrowded. And many die right in the lobby. So it's a sight to see, even going to the public hospital. I haven't been to Jamaica in a while, you know, but yeah, it's a sight to see, definitely.
So I guess you guys don't want to go to the Caribbean and be nurses?
Look, to go over there and teach.
Yeah.
Or go to the schools or something. But you know,
Yeah.
I'm beginning to see the political problem. I was up there about 2 years ago. I think I was in Runway Bay with some friends, what have you. But then when I went to, when I first went to Jamaica, I went with my dad before he died, what have you. And so he remembered his nickname, but this is when they were having, I can't think of the name of those problems where the little forts, they were having some political problems. There's a lot of political problems there that I saw that really bothered me. You see all these big resorts, the people there no longer had the land, no longer had the beaches, because all of these large resorts coming in and buying up all the land and people. And then I would walk to church and I said, why are the sidewalks so bad here in Jamaica? You come up this beautiful place, then you walk into the crumbling sidewalks, you know, what have you. For a long time, everybody knows where everything's at, but I was the street signs. And so they would say down here, or this is here, and you know, that would bother me. And I think that's, how do we get that? That's what's been frustrating to me. How do we have people who are, in a sense, robbing the land, but us being tourists also coming? Why isn't that some of that money going back into the health system?
We don't have enough
Everything.
time to have that
I know, that's
colonizer
that's a whole nother-
conversation. That's a whole historical, yeah,
But
yeah.
that affects those nurses, and that's what they're feeling, that all this plight with not having these things they need to do nursing with.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I mean,
Absolutely.
it's not that I would not be a nurse in Jamaica, because I do know nurses that are Jamaican. I even talked to one. I was like, how do you live out here? How do you? And she says, well, I own my house. You know, because most people, they own their land.
Mhm.
They have, you know, passed out for family, they own their land. And she said, so I live off of, you know, she said, I make do. And she lived quite comfortably. So I guess that's just like people that live in California. Like, how do you live in California?
Right.
And they make do, so.
And a lot of the nurses too, they'll come to the US or to UK or Canada or wherever. So it's not just the United States of America that's bleeding the Caribbean nurses, right? It's all the European countries that are looking for qualified nurses. So, you know, a lot of them, like the economy of the Caribbean, a lot of the people live outside the country, send money home to take care of their families there. So.
I went last year and did a presentation in the Bahamas. And I had an opportunity of talking to some of the nurses there, and then them showing me their hospital. I didn't go in, but the conversation was resources and pay, and then the inequities of care as well, and then even during COVID. So for me, when you ask the question, do you want to go back? I think it's a bigger question in terms of, if we go back, how do we help and support? Because in the United States, there was a large influx of Filipino nurses that were able to come in. And then when I asked the question at a state level, just to be able to get a better understanding, is there curriculum that was more like ours that allowed them to transition? So when you have educators like our living legend, Mr. stated, when you really have educators that go and look at it in that capacity and bring the knowledge and find pathways for them to come back over, I don't think we're really thinking about how to get people to come back over if they desire to, and still come back and help the country itself. So
That's
there
a
has to
great
be
point.
a way of rethinking the process as well, not brain draining the country, but how can we support the schools? How do we collaborate and do exchanges as well? So I think if we start thinking in that capacity, we'll have a back and forth and be able to help a whole bunch of families as well.
That's a great point. Go ahead.
One thing we could add at our Columbus Day event last year, we had a professor from University of West Indies to talk about global warming. And I was surprised at her answer. What are going to be the biggest effects of global warming in Jamaica? She said healthcare.
Healthcare, yeah.
Because it'll be a warmer climate, more mosquitoes, more disease. So it's something else to really look out for.
Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna move on to the next question. As Black nurses, and you ladies touched on this throughout the conversation, but as Black nurses, Mary Seacole and Mary Mahoney faced discrimination. What challenges remain today? And it would have been nice, next time we do this, we're gonna invite the male nurse, because I'd love to get his perspective on a question like this, right?
My son is a male nurse.
We should have invited him. You should have brought him, would have fed him.
What is he emergency or ICU? He's management liaison between the administration and nursing office. He's in the nursing office, but he wasn't an ICU. Places. Yeah.
I would love to hear her perspective. I just asked Dr. Leonard, though. I would love to hear her perspective as ANA's Michigan's president, because that would probably be totally different than a clinician, educator, as well as a researcher. Her perspective would be totally different.
Well, it actually started prior to me becoming the president for ANA Michigan. It actually started in my role as a CNO. You know, in my role as a CNO, I have my credentials, I have my experience that made me eligible for that job. But a lot of people felt that I was a token put in that role because, again, I was the first CNO for that position. And then, you know, we go into meetings sometimes and I would say things and people wouldn't hear me. But the person next to me of a lighter shade would say the same thing. And everybody would be like, yeah. And I'm sitting there like, I just said that. And so I had to learn how to roar. Like, I said that. And then even in my role for ANA Michigan, you know, prior to me becoming president, I did 2 terms as secretary, plus that in that organization for a year before my 2 terms as secretary. And when I became president, it was, they need to, again, that whole token child thing came up. I'm like, do you guys understand that I have years of experience behind me? I spent over 20 years in leadership. I worked for this. I earned everything that, that I have. I'm not a token child. I have a voice, and I'm making sure, even in my, in my role as ANA president, I'm putting more color behind me, and I'm bringing more color to the forefront. When we were having COVID, I was the one that said, we need to talk to those staff nurses. Let's have these town hall discussions. We need to talk, we need more diversity. The ANA board today is more diverse than it has ever been. We have men, we have men, we have women, we have a younger group. It's not the over 50 white women board anymore. So I'm very respectful of that. But for so long, I dealt with imposter syndrome. I felt that people, the way people respond to me, there were times that I shrunk back because I didn't feel that I had, that I belonged. And so I would shrink back, but again, I had to take back my power and I had to learn how to roar and stand on the fact that all of my skills and credentials and education brought me to where I was at. I wasn't handed anything, so I didn't have to shy back from it.
That's a real big problem. So I know even with students that I'm dealing with, I'm struggling with some of their, can I say it, some of the things that they're lacking. I said, people are going to see color first. What you say? You can say whatever we want. They're going to see color first. And if you're not speaking properly or not upholding the standards of care or not doing these things to show that you're worthy to be here at the table, that's a problem. So I have to work on a number of things, I think. And I'm just being honest with some of the things that we're dealing with in their choice of what school to go to. All this is important in terms of professionalism. It's just not about the money and the job. Okay, this is something that I really feel very strong about. You have to commit to those values. You want to be a nurse for the right reasons, and to increase the profession and our role, they have to seek right people. They have to seek people who are credentialed. Dr. Leonard brought it out just perfectly. I'm not that token. I earned my way here.
Who, when the conversation about token comes up, and I know it probably was very often in the beginning, were it your colored counterparts that had that to say, or was it the melanin challenged individual?
Unfortunately, I found myself sitting at the top by myself a lot of times. I didn't have that support that I needed from my sisters because they felt that I thought I was all that. And they didn't understand, that I'm getting pressure from here, I'm getting pressure from here, and I have to perform, and I have to extra perform because of who I am, because of my skin color. And they thought I was being fun. I'm like, no, I'm not being, I'm still Bridget, but I have a job to do. And so it was a lot of my sisters that sometimes held me down. And that's why I chose, sometimes people say, hey, Dr. Leonard, where do you teach? And I'm like, I'm a nursing instructor. And they're like, oh, what university? I'm like, no, I'm not at a university. Some of these well-known universities sought me out because of my doctorate degree, but I chose to work at Wayne County Community College because I wanted to go where people look like me could look at me and know that anything and everything was possible. So I wanted to go to that community, to those teen moms, to those single moms, to those people that were like me, high school dropouts and so forth, to say, excuses are not accepted. You can make it. So that's why I chose to go to community college versus a university. And so, racism exists, but I try to tell them, like, stand on your own merit, fight for what you believe in, but be at the table. Have to be at the table.
Very good. Danielle, you wanted to add something?
So I'm saying, it is challenging because I also precept, the younger nurses. And so I tell them, if I see a young Black nurse come on, I take them up my wing. And it's like, oh, she's doing that. I say, she's not her. You are. And there's a different standard. And unfortunately, this is the world we live in. Is it going to change? I don't know. When will it change? No. Is it fair? No. But that's life. And you have to accept that. So things that they do, you can't do. Things that you have to do 10 times better than you always, as a Black woman, you always have to, it feels like you always have to prove yourself. You have to prove that if you question an order, it's like, how dare you question it? Especially coming from a Black woman. I'm like, well, I'm not doing that. That's unsafe. So then you get labeled as the angry Black woman, which is fine. I'm okay with that label. But as a younger nurse, it's it messes with your self-esteem. It does. I'm 42, so I'm like, they already know.
So, Dr. De Souza, has it changed truly
from when you were in nursing school and practicing versus what these beautiful ladies are talking about today?
We did something, what's our montage that we did?
Mary Mahoney monologue.
We did some monologues. And here I am back here, I'm at a university. All my students are white. I've got a lab coat on that has my name. I'm coming to meet the clients because I'm making the assignment. And I always try to go in to meet the clients so I know how well prepared my students are. I'm doing like a mini assessment on them too as well. And they'll say, are you here to draw blood? Are you here from housekeeping? And I got a white coat on. That's what I'm saying. People don't see it. Now, that was back in the 70s. However, now my contemporaries can speak to that.
Right.
What do they see?
I'm not discriminated because of my name.
Yeah.
Not over the phone. Ayana, I'm the nurse. Your name is what?
Yeah.
Ayana, and this was the question, and you were the nurse? So, yeah, it hasn't changed.
It has not. But it falls on us though, as educators, we've got to be prepared. And I find that I'm hearing this now from a group of students. I don't know if we're preparing them to deal with those issues. And you can't do it in the traditional classroom. So how do you do that? Get to mentor them to help them wiggle your way around this. How do you do this? How do you still smile? How do you still be confident? How do you still do all these things in spite of it all? When somebody's saying, I don't want a Black nurse. Now, some people got sued, I think, at certain hospitals, so that kind of helps some of that.
Right.
You know, but how do you, this is what we have to do as an organization, as mentoring nurses. We've got to help them to raise that level. You know, it's just.
And it's just coming together, sticking together, because it can be so stressful. You know, I've been in situations where I was on the floor and we had working side by side by a white nurse, and the family knew that I was their family's nurse, and they just regarded me and went to their nurse. So sticking together and speaking up and having, like I said, having a seat at the table. Having a seat at the table to bring these topics out, because sometimes they forget, well, I didn't know that. Well, what do you mean? No, this is what's going on. So
there's a reality within our society. It's not just the discrimination that we talk about. And I tell my students when I'm lecturing that you can be Caucasian and walk in the door and you look like someone's ex-wife and they don't want you either. So for my African American students, I want you to walk in a room. This is what they're going to see because this is who you are. But I want your skills, your talent, your expertise to lead. It has to lead. You have to know what you need to know. And so it's so important. Last week, I had a student come in, and it was the most beautiful, memorable moment for me as an educator. I have a lot because I've been teaching 16 years. But this student said that I'm so happy to be here because I don't have anyone in my family that looks like you. I'm a first generation college student. So I said, you know what? I'm a first generation college student. By the way, I didn't pass my board semester. I've been on academic probation before. It just changed. It changed the atmosphere. And I said, guess what? There's someone else that's here too that looks like me. And I got on the phone and called my colleague. I said, hey, this is soon to be Dr. Nima. She's going to finish up her doctorate. And you just saw the expression on her face. There was power in that space because that day she left there knowing that there was a possibility. I think we have to give that image of us in front of our children a little bit sooner. Elementary school, middle school, high school, and let them see that it's possible. And don't paint the picture that life has been easy. I love what Dr. Leonard just stated, that sometimes it can be us pulling us down as well. So you don't want to be shocked knowing that that can happen as well too. But
right.
If you're a strong clinician, regardless, allow your skills to kind of lead you as well too. And that's the way I teach in
Great point. So now we're going to wrap up, and this is, and we'll take it from Ayana all the way, even you, Robert, you're going to be involved in this exercise. So now that we've talked about Mary Seacole and Mary Mahoney, and we've had great conversation with these beautiful nurses here, do you have any final reflections
on their careers and how you think that may have helped you or hindered you in your growth as a nurse? Robert, don't answer the nurse part. So we start with you, Ayana.
My final reflections on Mary C. Cole and Mary Mahoney. They were leaders, they were trailblazers. Especially when I can speak for Mary Mahoney, she was about community. And that's instilled in me. I love my community. I love helping my people, and just coming together and collaborating. So that's my final reflection.
I am so thankful to the ancestors because they've led the way. They've given us a source of hope. They're still here with us. We're still fighting the same battles, and we can learn to just keep going forward, being the best that we can.
Your face looks like my face. Your nose is us. And I think it just sets a way for our ancestors, our past, to be able to say it's possible.
I believe that this session, learning about Mary C. Cole and Mary Mahoney, it just lit a fire in me to make sure that I take this as a torch and pass it to my student forward. To make sure that I do due diligence and making sure that my students don't sit 20 years from now saying, I didn't know anything about this. So I think I'm gonna make sure that I find a way. We were kind of talking a little bit over here. I might not be able to do it in a lecture, but if I'm in my clinical setting, I'll definitely leave it into it.
So learning about Mary C. Cole and about Mary Mahoney, I just admire the leadership, the entrepreneurship, and that encourages me to do so. And I want to be an example for the future generations. I want to, make a difference. Be positive role models. I can say one thing about, because I'm a retired educator, so I would take liberties when I taught transition, which was one of those courses. So, naturally, we talked about Clara Barton and all that, but I would throw the question out regardless. Well, who was the first Black one? Who was the first Filipino? Who was the first Spanish? So there's ways you can do that. So I'm just wondering now with the curriculums of the doctors here, do they still have that kind of course where they talk a little about history? See, they don't focus on history. We don't want to admit know more about our history, but you have to know about our history to know where we're going. So I don't know if they really have the historical aspect in the curriculum still.
They do, and in the very beginning, they talk about professionalism as well, code of ethics, A&A as well too. So it can kind of be infused gently as well too to open up a door, but it can't be lectured on. With the explicit bias training as well, and talking about some of the health disparities within our state as well, that can be possibly layered within that as well. So there's ways of doing it as well.
Robert,
So I am not a nurse. My wife is a nurse. Delicia. To take off. So hello. So I'm hearing what she goes through as a Black nurse at Hudson Hospital. So I'm learning hear stuff. And I found Mary C. Cole very inspiring to see how she had this assertiveness and, you don't tell me to come here. Okay, I'll go. That kind of spirit, how it's just so inspirational. Delicia has her hand up if she wants to say something. Okay.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
Delicia.
Yes, Delicia, very bad at technology, couldn't get it going. I would like to say one thing. I've been a nurse in the inner city of Detroit for 37 years. Thank you, Mrs. D'Souza, by the way. And for the first 15 years, I had no idea that Black nurses didn't run the show places, because I had the benefit of having my manager, the director, the chief nurse, the vice president of nursing were all Black where I worked. It wasn't until we moved down the street, that was at Hudson. It wasn't until we moved down the street and went to a meeting that I turned and said, where's the rest of the Black managers? And I found out that life wasn't like that. I wanted to ask a specific question though for the panel. is, do you think that sometimes maybe nurses from the Caribbean or nurses who come to us from Africa might have even a double sword to bear? And I'm saying that because after working in a hospital all these years, sometimes someone is known as, oh, you know, the Jamaican nurse. Well, dang, she's got a name. Do you know what I mean? So is it like, yeah, you're Black, one strike, and yeah, you're not even African-American, a second strike?
Yes.
That's my question, please.
Yes, because everybody who has an accent is Jamaican. They'll say, oh, you know the Jamaican nurse that work on 5 West? I'm like, she's from Liberia. Isn't it the same thing? It's not. Jamaica and Africa. Yeah, not even close. But I said, you're right, we're the same because we're all one, right? That's my cousin. So yes, but yeah, it is. And they do have it harder. They have to come over the accent. Speak English. What are you saying? You know, yeah.
I think that the nurses who are, the African-American nurses who are in those certain positions already have a different and better responsibility to try to make that not be the case. Because I don't think, you know, sometimes in hospitals, it is such a dog-eat-dog world. And everybody's trying to do their little part to get ahead, but very little to help somebody else come up too. And I think that has to be done. I also have one just suggestion as far as this is concerned, because I'm currently in the other minority nursing association in Detroit. And as a student nurse, 37 years ago, when both of them were going, I had never heard of any of them. So maybe my suggestion is perhaps not just your organization, but my organization. Though we do have chapters on some college campuses, but very specific college campuses. There hasn't been a real concerted effort to try to go to places where there are maybe more minority nurses and start a chapter. But maybe we could get more of an input when they're in nursing school through the state's Student Nursing Association, who I'm sure would let somebody talk at something. Then maybe that they start to understand their responsibilities as a Black nurse a little differently from the start. It's harder to teach the old folks stuff, but new nurses coming up, that might be an idea. I don't know if you've done that already, but thanks for letting me say something.
Thank you for your comments, greatly appreciated. So do you guys as educators, is there opportunities to teach cultural sensitivity to multicultural nurses or students that, for example, Danielle of a Caribbean background is in a class with African-American nurses and African nurses? Is there your organization, so it wouldn't be a school taught thing, right? But your organization itself, does it lend for conversations around cultural sensitivity? Let me find out who you are, let's share a meal together, you know, so we can now have this common ground to understand and help each other because we now know and love on each other.
I think the nature of nursing education doesn't allow that. Nursing, people have a misconception of what nursing school is. They see things on TV, oh, you're just doing this and that, and they don't realize it's like boom, boom, boom. Every 2 weeks there's a test, da, 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 da. So this has to come outside of the classroom unless you have a educator that can kind of wean it around. And I was able to do that when I was at Henry Ford, because all my Black students, they had to come to the organization. I was like twisting arms or kind of bringing them in. But a lot of the nursing organizations have some Black student nurses associations or organizations within the campus. I think Oakland University, a couple of places has that. That's where they kind of do some of this supportive aspects. Other than that, it's just, you'll find that the students are so stressed with trying to meet the demands of nursing education. They don't always have that opportunity to do that social aspect, to be supportive. It's little dog eat dog, because I gotta survive, I gotta take this course, I gotta pass. So some of that doesn't allow for that.
The
more
interaction,
mutual
right?
interaction that
But
we
an
want.
organization like Mary Mahoney, right?
We're
Is
starting
there,
something with the grade schools? We have a program with Detroit Service Learning Academy. We're introducing to middle school nursing.
Mhm.
And we're going out to the schools, presenting ourselves to the students so they can see this is a viable option. This is what nurses do in a realistic format. We tried to do Detroit Public Schools, but we ran into some conflict with them. We couldn't get it going. And that was with a number of schools. They had, UD was involved, Wayne State, but it couldn't get off the ground with the Detroit Public Schools. So I don't know what happened with that.
right?
We've had things with PAL, the Police Athletic League, where different people come in and talk to the students in terms of career options in the past. So there have been these events and these means to try to bring this, but you know, with resources and things that are happening, and the pandemic just knocked a lot of everything out, you know, what have you, in terms of some of the things that we could do. So I think this is a good opportunity, and we'll probably be resourcing, doing some of these
Right.
things again, getting to this population.
So Robert, with the organization that you work with, are there opportunities for collaboration or presentation to any at the workforce centers, that if there were students that were interested, for example, to find out about nursing and how to get to a nursing organization that can help them to even find a program? Is there a way to do that?
Well, for us, probably the biggest way would be the Grow Detroit's Young Talent Program, the summer jobs program for youth. You know, there are placements available for in that program at numerous businesses. So I'm not sure what the in-reach is for hospitals or, but that would be one good way to try to spread the word.
Because she was talking about Detroit Public Schools. I'm thinking maybe there's an opportunity for one of the organizations, Mary Mahoney or something like that, to have access to speak to some of the students that are put together in any one of the programs to kind of talk about what Black nursing is and encourage them to go to school for nursing. So I'm just wondering if there was any kind of connecting points that we can talk in the future about. You know, how can we do that? But this is the end of our program. Thank you, ladies, again for your time, your conversation. It has been absolutely splendid. I hope you ladies enjoyed the conversation as much as we did. And I'm hoping that we also can stay connected so that we can assist and support in any way that we can as a Caribbean Community Service Center. And if there's any way that you have opportunities for Caribbean nurses or Caribbean conversations in your spaces, that you can reach out to us. And if we can't facilitate it, we can connect you. So we appreciate you again so much. Thank you. And thanks to everybody that attended the program with us today. We did videotape this and we'll have this for later use. So we do appreciate your time and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the weekend.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. They say clap it up.
Yeah, clap it up, clap it up. Oh yeah, you know about Louise.